From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Doc Staples bringing you Unconquered with Doc Staples. As always, this podcast brought to you by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price. By Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida. By Shenandoah Newsma of shenrealestate.com in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. And by Garage Makeovers, the ¡1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. And also, you know what? I'm going to shout out Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage. Give them a holler if you want a mortgage in Florida, Tennessee, or Kentucky. All right, let's go ahead and get to it in terms of our Florida preview. So, final game for the regular season for Florida State. They're going to have to win this to go to a bowl game. But yeah, is this win very likely? Is the real question. And to some degree, the answer boils down to which Florida team you're going to face. Because this Florida team has been bad, but there have been moments where they've been very competitive. On the bad side, they got beat by a bad LSU team at LSU, 20-10. They lost at home to USF, 18-16. They got stomped by Miami, 26-7. They got stomped by Texas A&M 34-17. They should have lost to Mississippi State, got that win by the skin of their teeth, 23-21, as Mississippi State turned it over late, right before they were getting ready to kick for a win there. They got curb stomped at Kentucky 38-7. This has been a bad team. And then they got whipped by Tennessee in Gainesville 31-11 in a game that was really not that close. So if that's the Florida team that Florida State's going to play, that's a team you can beat. On the flip side, they beat Texas in Gainesville 29-21, and they dang near beat Georgia 24-20 loss in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. They were in position where if a single call goes a different way, they probably beat that Georgia team. So, you know, if Florida State plays the team that was on the verge of beating Georgia and did beat Texas, you're not going to win that. You're not going to win that game. So that's where things stand. This is very much going to be contingent on which Florida team you're going to play. And sort of like the NC State game that way. Are you going to play good Florida or bad Florida? Now, here's where I think the odds actually are in favor of playing, if not bad Florida, not the same Florida that beat Texas and came near beating Georgia and was even competitive some with Texas A&M. The biggest difference, the biggest reason for that is that those games coincided with freshman wide receiver Dallas Wilson and also fellow freshman receiver Eugene Wilson, Eugene Wilson III, playing in those games and being threats. But Dallas Wilson in particular changed that offense. 6'3", 213 freshman who can go. And against Texas, that was his debut. 6 catches for 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Texas A&M, 3 catches for 20 yards for a touchdown. And he played against Georgia. Georgia shut him down, but he was a threat against Georgia that helped open up some other things. And he's out for the remainder of the year with a foot injury. And so those middle 4 games, the 4 games that he played in, Texas, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Georgia, were the 4 games where the Florida offense has played the best this season. One guy can really make a difference when you've got a number 1 wide receiver who can really open things up for you. Similarly, Eugene Wilson, 9 catches for 121 yards and a score against Georgia, and now he's out for the remainder of the year. So really the 2 receivers that have had the most success for them, that were the biggest threats for them, are not available now, which is a pretty big deal for a Florida State pass defense that has not been very good on the season. So, you know, if Dallas Wilson were going to play in this game, I would be picking Florida to win comfortably, because I think he makes that big of a difference for them in terms of what they're able to do. And you look at the overall passing numbers on the season, and coming into the year, Florida was a trendy, some people had them even as a potential playoff team. Now, I kind of thought that was silly at the time. I didn't think they'd be quite as bad as they have been. But when you looked at this schedule, you went, well, first of all, the schedule is going to be really hard. They're not going to be a playoff team against that schedule. But second of all, the reason that everybody who was talking about this, the reason that they were picking picking Florida as a potential contender was they were looking at Lagway and saying, that's a guy with really elite tools, with the top end, with the ability to be a legit player. And if he plays to his ability, they can beat anybody. And honestly, if you go and you watch his game against Texas, where he went 21 of 28 for 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, you can see it. And the talent just oozes at times. I mean, there are times where he is just amazing. I mean, he makes throws and you go, wow. Similarly, against Georgia, I mean, that's a really good Georgia team. As always, good Georgia defense, 15 of 24, only 166 yards, but 1 touchdown, no picks, played well in that game. And they were in position to win. But the delta between his upside and his downside is enormous. So you look at LSU, they scored 10 points against LSU, and he was 33 of 49, almost 70%, 67% completion percentage, but threw 5 picks. And on the season, he's at 15 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He's a guy that has been willing to throw the football to the other team, and when he's under pressure, he's a different kind of player. He's not been great under any circumstances this year, but if you look at what he has been under pressure, it's been a problem. Look at his Pro Football Focus grades, and he's at a 50.1 when he's pressured. He's about as likely, actually he's twice as likely to have a turnover-worthy play under pressure as he is to make a big-time throw. Now, what's even more fascinating is when he's clean. And they've got a good offensive line, so he's been kept clean 70% of the time this year. And that's against some really good defensive lines. So I don't expect to see Lagway under a lot of pressure against Florida State. But even when he's been kept clean, he's had 15 turnover-worthy plays and only 9 big-time throws. Now, 9 is a pretty big number, but 15 turnover-worthy plays is an enormous number. Almost 6% of the time, when he's kept clean, he's making turnover-worthy plays. That's not great. 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions when kept clean. This is a guy you can trick. This is a guy that you can cause problems with disguise, with movement. He doesn't always see underneath coverage. You got to change the picture against him. And if you can change the picture against him, you can undercut some stuff. He's going to make some throws where you go, what in the world was he thinking? And he's going to throw off balance. He's going to try to, he's so confident in his arm and his ability to fit the ball into places that he's just going to make decisions that that leave you scratching your head. So that's what you're counting on. You look at against Tennessee, 11 of 17 for 116 yards, one touchdown, no picks. They started figuring out that you don't want him throwing 35, 40 times a game. And when they've been able to keep him from doing that, they've been able to be more competitive. And so this brings us really to, on this side of the ball, if you're going to have success against Florida, if you're going to beat Florida, you have to start by being good enough against the run. And that's when they've won, they've had success running the football. Texas, 37 carries, 159 yards, 4.3 per carry. Against Georgia, 32 carries, 115 yards, 3.5. That's not great, but it's good enough. And the main thing that Florida State's going to have to do to have some success on this side of the ball, they're going to have to stop Jaden Baugh sophomore from running back from Atlanta. He's been the bulk of Florida's offense on the season, the reliable thing on Florida's offense. 900 yards, averaging just under 5 yards a carry. He's also been good in the passing game, 33 catches for 210. And, their offense runs through this guy. 230 pounds, and he has been a load in the games that they've won. Again, Texas, 107 yards. Mississippi State, 150 yards. He's had success. 72 yards on 4.8 yards per carry against Georgia. 61 yards, 4.07 yards per carry against Kentucky. Had five yards a carry against Tennessee. If Florida State lets him go for 120 yards, 130 yards, they're going to lose this game. Almost certainly. They're going to need a couple turnovers at that point. And at that point, you're making it easier on Florida to protect the turnover-prone quarterback. So it really starts with that. This is going to be a war up front. And this is where Tony White and the defensive side, they've got to find ways to handle the Florida offensive line, which is big, which is, they've got some size. They've got some ability to push you around. You got to win on the interior, and you got to find ways to stop the run. And if you can stop the run and you want to force Lagway into longer yardage situations where you can change the picture on him, you got a very good chance of winning this football game. That's how that's going to go. So on that side of the ball, I think this is something of strength on strength. Florida State's been pretty good stopping the run on the season. Florida has been dependent on running it so that they don't turn it over to their quarterback, who's a bit turnover prone. And you're going to wind up with a game that probably is not Florida scoring 40 points. I mean, on the season, they've not scored a ton. I mean, they opened with 55 against LIU, and the highest output they've had the remainder of the season is 29 points against Texas. It's a team that just doesn't score a lot of points. So that's good news for Florida State, because I think if you're in this game, if you're a Florida State coach, one of the things you're doing in this game is, what's the magic number? Where do we need to be offensively? How many points do we need to score to have a really good chance of beating this Florida team? And looking at what you've got, 29 points is the max they've scored on the season against an FBS team. Not just against Power 5, against FBS. So you look at that and you say, okay, they average 5.3 yards per play. They're scoring 16.4 points per game against FBS. And against Power 5, that's 16.4 also. So that's where they're at. So you feel like if you can get into the mid to high 20s, you're probably going to win this football game. And, really, I think if you're FSU, that's what you're banking on. You're saying, okay, can we, without turning it over a bunch, can we get to 24, 28 points? Because if so, you probably win this game. And defensively, you're just focused on, is it possible? Can you find ways of limiting the run game enough and causing enough problems for Lagway to not let him get into a rhythm and let him go off? Because the concern, and this is what we've talked about all season, when we've, the theme of the year has been styles make fights. The concern all season has been, if you're playing a quarterback who can get hot, those are the teams that can beat Florida State, that are bad matchups for Florida State. Lagway's a guy that can get hot. He's a guy that can make those wow throws. He's a guy that can hit those guys over the middle and make it look easy at times. You just can't let him get comfortable enough to do that. And if they're able to keep leverage and do all of that, then I think you feel really good about where they're at going into this game. So offensively, or I'll just say Florida State defense against Florida's offense, I think somewhere around 5 yards a play. I mean, they're averaging 5.31, so I'll say right around the average. Let's say 5 to 5.25 yards per play is what you'd expect. in this game. And that probably adds up to around 20 points. And if you can get a turnover or two on that, then you're in great shape. So now flipping to the other side of the ball, the real question is what Florida State can do to beat this Florida defense, which has actually been pretty good too. Defensively, they're solid. And, they are what you would expect in terms of personnel at Florida. You watch them, and there's dudes on that defense. I mean, I think so. When I watched the Florida-Miami game early in the year, that's Miami, Florida. When I watched that game earlier in the year, when I watched the film, I found myself going, man, FSU would probably trade personnel defensively with this Florida team. Now, they're not as good, I think, defensively as Florida State has been on the whole. But personnel-wise, you'd probably trade. Now, I think some injuries and things have added up on the season. But they've got some talent. They've got some dudes who can cause problems. And particularly in the secondary, they've had some guys where you go, man, would love to have that guy at safety. Would love to have some guys that move around like that. But they've still not been able to put them in position to be a dominant defense. And on the season, they're now giving up 26.7 yards or 26.7 points per game. And here's sort of been the progression. They gave up 16 points a game in August, September. Now, some of that is weighted by the 0 given up in the opener against Directional State. In October, they gave up 25.3 points per game. In November, they've been giving up 31.8. So they've been getting worse over the course of the season as injuries have added up and as they've gotten worn down against what I think is probably the nation's toughest schedule. Their schedule's just been ridiculous. So they've gotten banged up. They've had some issues on that side of the ball, and they've not gotten a ton of support from their offensive side. So they've been giving up 31 points per game in the month of November. Now, granted, the month of November for them, again, schedule-wise, has been playing teams that are better than Florida State. You have Georgia, scored 24. Ole Miss scored 34. Tennessee scored 31. And then, well, Kentucky's Kentucky. I don't know that they're better than Florida State, but that was at Kentucky. And Kentucky was able to take some turnovers and such and change that into a weird game, but 38 points. So they've struggled. And in terms of total defense given up, they're giving up a little over 6 yards per play in the month of November. 6.02 yards per play in the month of November. And that's climbing over the course of the season. They gave up 5.99 yards per play against Kentucky. Most of that on the ground. And this has really been kind of the surprising thing for them, has been defensively. They've not been as good against the run as you would expect a Florida team to be, especially with how they've built with some size and they built toward a particular vision. They gave up 44 carries for 233 yards against Kentucky. Only 3.54 yards per play for 138 yards against Georgia, by the way. Just, again, Georgia has not been as physical as they were in years past. Not that surprising. I projected that they would just continue to get a little bit less and less physical on the offensive front once they hired Stacey Searles, and it's just taken a little bit to take. But they're not quite as formidable running the ball as they used to be. Ole Miss, 48 carries for 237 yards, 4.94 per carry. Tennessee, 51 carries for 248, 4.86 yards per carry. I mean, that's how those games went. If I'm Florida State, I look at these numbers and I say, okay, look, the teams that have had the most success against Florida have been the teams that have consistently stuck with the run. I'm saying I've got to have 45 carries or more in the running game in this game. Stick with it. You know that they're probably not going to score a bunch of points. Be patient. Stick with the run. Be content to be in a slugfest. And if you're only averaging 3.5 yards per carry, if you're only, getting into some third and shorts and so on periodically, that's okay. Just keep some leverage, keep running the football. And I think you got to pick which running backs you want to use. And to me, this is Chroma, this is Sawchuk. You stick with those guys, a little bit of some of the others for some, speed type stuff, but stick with the guys that are going to plow forward and are going to hit that hole with some speed. And then just try, and this is where you run the wheels off Tommy Castellanos. It's almost certainly your final game of the season. Well, it is the final game of the season if you're not going to win it. And if it's not, then you've got a bowl game left and that's it. So there's no reason to protect Castellanos in this. Run the wheels off him. Run full option stuff. Run all of that stuff. Get the quarterback as a threat and do everything you can to get 45, 50 carries in this game. And over time, that Florida front has worn down against everybody they played. They wore down against Miami of Florida. They wore down against Texas A&M. They wore down against Kentucky, against Ole Miss, against Tennessee. And if you can make this game into a field position slugfest, just running the football, you're probably in position to win this game. And by the numbers, I think you should win this game. By the numbers, I think Florida State should average about 4 yards a carry, maybe a little bit more, and wind up putting enough points on the board with just steady commitment to that to be able to have success. By the numbers. But let's go ahead and get to the prediction part of the show. The problem is that over the last couple of years, Florida State has been maybe the worst team in the Power 5 on the road. And you're about to go into one of the harshest road environments in the country. And if you look at how things have actually gone, you look at the stats of Florida State on the road, the offense has been completely different. At home, averaging 45 carries per game for 5.59 yards per rush, 26 touchdowns. On the road, 37 carries per game, 4.5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Completely different. You look at the overall output in terms of scoring. On the road, we'll just do this at home, Florida State's averaging 43.3 points per game. Now that's thrown off a bit by the non-Power 5. 66 points per game against non-Power 5. But on the road, Florida State has averaged 18 points per game. By the way, right on Florida, their average. So, Florida's averaging 16 points per game. Florida State's averaging 18 points per game on the road. And against, by the way, Power 5 teams, Florida State has only averaged 25.8 points per game. So you look at the difference between road and home for FSU, and this game becomes basically a coin flip. And it's a rivalry game already, so you know that it's kind of a coin flip as it is. In ordinary circumstances, it's one of those throw out the record books type games. But can you bet on this Florida State team on the road against anybody at this point? I shouldn't have against NC State. They dominated that game and found ways to lose anyway. This is a game where Florida State is the better team. They should, on a down-to-down basis, win this game. In all things being equal, Florida State should win this game something like 20-17 or 17-13 or something like that. One of those ugly games, but you're the better team. You should come out and be able to win that. But I've seen enough Florida State, especially on the road, to say what should happen here is probably not what's going to happen. So I'm going to project this as another loss for Florida State. I don't think it should be. I think actually when you break these two teams down on film and all that, the way that it should work is, as I said, something like, 20-17 Florida State. But I think they find ways, especially on the road, to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So unless they change their stripes somehow, this is going to be another loss. And in Gainesville, I'm going to go Florida wins this game 17-13 as Florida State continues to find ways to step all over themselves with a couple key turnovers, maybe another special teams gaffe or something like that lead this to that kind of frustration. It should be something like Florida State 20-17 if you just look at how the numbers break down. But you just feel like Florida State's going to find a way to have that extra touchdown pulled off the board from something stupid, and they'll wind up something like 17-13, 7 points short of what they should be. That's what we'll go with. Have a good Thanksgiving weekend, everybody. I'll talk to you again. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please tell a friend and also rate and review it at Apple Podcasts and your podcast manager of choice. If you haven't done it in a while, do it again. It really helps the visibility of the podcast. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. Thanks, as always, to my sponsors, EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price, Louis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Newsma of shenrealestate.com and the Research Triangle of North Carolina, and Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. All their information available over at Unconquered and in the show notes of any of these shows. Thanks also to those supporters over at Patreon and Substack, where I post video analysis and field questions for the podcast. I'm so grateful for the support that you all have shown over the years. Really means a lot. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening. I made this.